Welcome, welcome, everyone. My name is Monica, and I'm the moderator for today's event. Thank you for joining us for today's industry webinar, The Outset Medical Increases Operational Agility and Achieves Seamless Compliance, a Digital Transformation Success Story, which is presented by Axendia, Inc., an analyst firm providing trusted advice for life science executives on business, technology, and regulatory issues, and Tulip, the leader in frontline operations, helping companies around the world equip their frontline workforce, leading to improved productivity, higher quality, and increased efficiency across their operations. With Tulip no-code platform, companies can empower those closest to operations to digitally transform processes, guide frontline workers, and gain real-time visibility into the people, tools, machines, and processes involved, all in a matter of days. Companies of all sizes across industries, including pharma, consumer electronics, aerospace and defense, contract manufacturing, automotive, medical devices, have implemented Tulip's intuitive platform to solve most of the pressing challenges in operations, error-proofing processes and boosting productivity with guided workflows, capturing and analyzing real-time data, and continuously improving operations. Now for Axendia's safe harbor statement. The content of today's session represents Axendia's analysis sourced from our research, interaction with regulatory officials and industry executives, and first-hand experience with clients. This event is not intended to endorse any company or product. So let's talk about our presenters today. We've got Marc Nash, who is the VP of Manufacturing and General Manager for Outset Medical in Mexico. Marc has spent the last more than 15 years leading operational teams and organizations in the medtech space. During this time, he lived and led teams in 4 countries, 3 continents, and focused his attention and efforts on both complex capital equipment and high-volume consumable manufacturing. Leveraging his global experience and knowledge, Marc's current role has him leading the vision and execution of a newly established state-of-the-art digital manufacturing facility in Tijuana, Mexico. The organization's passion for human-centric manufacturing, coupled with leveraging new technology capabilities, has enabled the facility to drive significant quality and productivity improvements. We also joined today Dr. Gilad Langer. He is the head of customer services and life sciences practice lead at Tulip. He's an accomplished business leader with more than 25 years of experience in IT, automation, and engineering services delivery, technical operations, business development, and sales. He has an accomplished track record of digital transformation to drive high levels of operational performance in manufacturing industries with a specific focus in the regulated life sciences industry. His focus and passion are the next generation and digital strategies and technologies for manufacturing. And last but not least, we welcome Daniel Matlis, who is the president and founder of Axendia, Inc. Dan has more than 3 decades of industry experience spanning the life cycle value chain. He is a member in FDA's Case for Quality Initiative and FDA's Advisory Council on the Enrichment in Silico clinical trial. Dan has presented Axendia's research findings to industry executives and the FDA officials. He's a frequent lecturer at industry events and has published numerous research reports and articles on key issues facing the life sciences and healthcare industries. Now, without further ado, we'll turn this over to our panelists, Marc, Gilad, and Dan.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. It's great to be speaking with you today. I'm honored to be joined by Marc Nash and Gilad Langer to discuss how Outset Medical increased operational agility and achieve seamless compliance. Marc, Gilad, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much, Dan. Looking forward.
Great. So let's start with you, Marc. Can you tell us a little bit about Outset Medical?
Sure. Outset Medical is a technology company which is revolutionizing the way we do dialysis. And think about dialysis. We've invented a machine called Tableau that is allowing patients to take back control of their lives. They no longer need to necessarily go to a clinic in order to get the solution of care that they need. If we think about the dialysis market is expensive. It's expensive not only to the patients and healthcare systems, but ultimately it's expensive for the taxpayers here in the United States. Of the $41 billion spent on dialysis through Medicare, it is actually only supporting 1% of the population of the US, although it's over 7% of the total budget. If we also think about the growing need for dialysis, today there's around 600,000 patients requiring dialysis, each and every week with over 90 million treatments. And with increases in high blood pressure, diabetes, and other diseases, we believe that that's going to increase up by over 30% in the next 8 to 10 years. Which all of that means that we need to make a solution that's not only more affordable, but also reduces the complexity of dialysis. When we think about dialysis, it's typically done in a hospital setting or in a clinic, and it requires a nurse and other care providers to help provide service and support during the dialysis treatment. But if we look at our machine Tableau, it's a clinic on wheels. It doesn't require all of that complexity around a traditional system. When we think about the different types of equipment used within the dialysis space, typically there are a multitude of different machines that are required. If you're in the ICU, if you're in a general bed, if you're in a clinic, or if you're in the home setting. And those are some of the different examples you see on the screen here. But what Tableau does is it actually reduces all of those different systems into one machine. And we even purify the water on site, because typically for dialysis, you need a large water filtration system. We do that within the machine. The other part of dialysis is that you need to make what's called a dialysate solution, a solution that mimics the blood. Typically, those are done in large mixing tanks or in those big bags you see on that cart. But with our machine, we actually do that real time within the system. All of this is helping to simplify the way that dialysis is given and allows patients to actually start on a system in the hospital and actually transition to our same system in the home setting, where they don't need to be utilizing a nurse, but just a caregiver such as their family or friends.
Great. That's you're making great inroads in an industry that really needs modernization. And the topic of today's conversation is around digital transformation. And we recently conducted a research study asking industry executives, what are the top goals for digital transformation within their organization? And interestingly, what we heard is that data-driven, intelligence-based decisions, followed by enhancing manufacturing efficiency and throughput, were the top two answers. So with that in mind, Gilad, can you tell us about some of the challenges that industry organizations are looking to address through their digital transformation initiatives based on your experience?
Yeah, for sure. So, I think the key here is the digital transformation. So I'm going to go through a number of the challenges that we've heard. None of these should be a surprise. I think we've been singing the same song for many, many years. It seems that with the adoption of digital technologies, they're brought back up, maybe with an expectation that, oh, maybe now we're going to solve them. So, things like smaller batches in custom devices or custom type of manufacturing. We've talked, in the past, it was called mass customization, and this idea of personalization of product has been around for quite a while. But now comes digital technology and say, okay, can we do it better? Can we do it faster? So we're seeing that come up again. Next to fluctuation in workforce. That's always been the case. With COVID coming in, it's become exacerbated even more. But on top of that, it's not only that we have transient workforces and people want to work at home. We also have the new generation, which is digitally native, that expects much more from what they're going to do in manufacturing of the use of digital tools. GXP compliance will never get old. I think, again, the idea here is we've always talked about making GXP compliance seamless. Now here we have an opportunity to truly make it seamless, and I think that's ordered. The other part of it is that with the part of GXP compliance is that most of what we've done so far when we talk about automations and digital or automation electronic systems or traditional manufacturing systems, we're very focused on GXP compliance and have solved it to some extent. Now we're not, in the context of the other challenges, you can see that it's not only about compliance. There's also other things that come in. The other challenges, the expectation is that we're going to solve the other challenges with these tools on top of the compliance piece. Quality, I think that goes across the board in any industry. The resolving the quality, reducing the total cost of quality, especially in a life sciences setting, but also it's truly to get in, to bring the quality into line. The age-old lean that we need to do quality or deal with quality where it happens. with data, we can actually do that much better. So that challenge is being brought up again. And how do we solve it in a digital setting? The limited real-time visibility. Yeah, I know that we've talked about this forever, even with dashboards that have existed quite a while. Again, the expectation is here we have digital data. Can we now really solve this problem once and for all? And then lastly, and I guess the main point here, there is paper everywhere. We're in 2023. There is still paper is the majority of how manufacturing is run in life sciences, but also in other industries. And that is, with the advent of digital technologies, are we asking, will we finally get rid of paper? I mean, that is the call to action, I guess, with digital technology.
Yep. And you bring up some great points, Gilad. Marc, what is your experience around the challenges that you were looking to address through digital transformation and Outset?
Sure, Dan. So firstly, OMM, or Outset Medical Mexico, is no longer drowning in paper. So we have gotten through that space, and we'll talk more about that. But when Outset started on this journey of insourcing its manufacturing through a new greenfield space, we knew we had to do something different. We're competing with ginormous organizations who are providing dialysis, and if we want to compete against the duopoly that exists today in the USA, we had to change the way we thought about manufacturing to be faster, to be leaner, and to be more agile. So we were looking for a solution or digital platform that allowed to ensure that we could change as the organization was changing, and that we could control our own destiny around those changes. Many systems that you can purchase today will set you up for one-time success, but as the business changes and pivots, that still becomes an issue. So we wanted really one that we could control, we could modify, and would grow with us. Another important part that Gilad touched on is obviously the GXP compliance piece. We are a Class 2 medical device product. We have one standard of quality compliance from both our headquarters to manufacturing, and we needed to ensure that the product that we put in place could be validated. And when we did additional software releases every 6 months, which is what we do, that those software releases wouldn't cripple the system. Because there's nothing better than getting a new toy or new tool, but actually not being able to leverage it due to the compliance risk.
And you bring up some excellent points. I mean, one of the things we often talk about is the fact that paper is the blankie for our industry. It makes us feel comfortable. It's something that we're familiar with, but it was the gold standard for the ancient Egyptians. And here we are 3,000 years later, still in many cases leveraging that paper because it makes us feel comfortable. And it really is time for change. And the technology is no longer the challenge, right? Now it's the reality. So the next thing we wanted to do was get our audience involved with a very simple poll. We wanted to find out from you, how long does it usually take, or did it take in the past, to deploy a new digital solution in your organization? And we're asking for order of magnitude. Did it typically, or does it typically take weeks to bring up a new solution? Does it typically take months or years to bring up that new digital solution within your organization? So not surprisingly, it typically takes months or years to bring these technologies into the fold. Very few are saying that they're getting them in weeks. So with that in mind, Marc, can you tell us a little bit about what Outset Medical's approach is to transforming your business practices in the age of what we call continuous disruption? Things are changing all the time, and implementing solutions in months or years can't keep up with what happens in the ground.
Totally, right? If we think about companies are now iterating product cycles much faster. And if we're waiting years to put in a digital solution for manufacturing of that, say, product, that product might not exist by the time that you actually put in that new digital system. So when we think about how Outset took this journey, similar to how we do many things, we start slow to run fast. And what we really started to look at was, how do we create small pilots that would eventually lead up to large impact? So when we think about it, we weren't trying to boil the ocean and start with the entire digitalization of our manufacturing facility, we really said, okay, how do we address one issue? Maybe it's work instructions, maybe it's the electronic batch history record system. But we said we wanted to start slow. Once we ended up creating a team that all they focused on for 4 months was the digitalization process. We started originally with one process engineer who spent about a month and a half to create one application within Tulip. And the reason we decided to make one application rather than doing multiple was so that we could better understand how do we want the design to look? How does that master app look like, kind of like in PowerPoint? What's the best way to configure your database, configure your slides, if you will? And then once we had that one app going, we started to run really fast. We ended up doing 90 additional apps in the course of 3.5 months. And that's kind of what you see here, which is we really started to make sure that the first app was correct, that we could prove to the business that this software system would work, that it's validatable, if that's a word, and that we wanted to make sure that once we got going, we could have enough momentum to, in essence, digitalize our entire manufacturing space within less than 6 months.
Yep. And you brought up a very good point, Marc, which is showing value to the business, right? That is key.
100%. If we can't show value to the business, then our ability to continue to add additional connectivity, IoT devices, et cetera, starts to diminish because the organization isn't seeing that return, right? I think another thing that's really important to kind of describe and explain is this concept of continuous improvement. Many organizations say that they continually improve, and I don't doubt it, but continuous improvement and continually improving is, in my opinion, a different thing. And most organizations that are not living in the digital era today are doing what I would call step improvement, where they, in essence, they take stopwatches, they do whatever they need to do to collect the data. They then spend days, weeks, months analyzing said data, and then they make an incremental improvement. And then typically at that point, because they need to move on to the next thing, they leave it at that new plateau, if you will, for X amount of time. In the digital world, we're actually really able to have true continuous improvement through real-time monitoring, real-time data, where we are continually making improvements to our processes. A lot of our work instructions, to give you an example, are within 2 years are in revision 90, right? That's just showing the speed of improvements that we can make due to the fact that everything's digital and much quicker to put through.
One of the things that I'm just going to share my experience when we engaged with Marc at Outset. This is the early 2020. For me, it was one of the first time where I've experienced, Tulip, I would say at large in a manufacturing setting. And, I remember that after the period, it was 4 months and 90 apps or 100 apps that were put in, because I came from the traditional MES world. And I looked at it and I said to myself, something doesn't seem right. It doesn't. How can we do this in this short of a time? Gain, so much value with so little people, without this big project that was going on, and it was a question that came. It's like, is this really possible? And the answer is yes. And I think the learning from this is that if you want to characterize something as truly digital or not, you can use that as a qualifier. Can we gain speed? Can we gain fast and iteratively? If you do not do that, you are not using digital technology. That's number one. Number two is this process of continual improvement. If the technology they're using does not inherently support continual improvement, meaning that you can quickly do a change and see the impact of that change, then you do not have digital technology. You're not using digital technology. So it's a very easy, and I send this message to nearly every customer that I have. Just check it out. It's a very simple way to measure if you truly are transforming digitally.
Yep. And you bring up an excellent point. In the olden days, as my kids like to remind me, the way we used to implement solutions is you had a tremendous sunken cost, right? You had to go up front, you had to do a pilot, and very often those ended in pilot purgatory. What we're seeing now is organizations, especially those who have modern technology, being able to identify a use case. Let's look at that use case, let's implement it, and let's see the value. There's very little of that sunken cost. Marc, can you talk a little bit? I think it aligns with what you just talked about.
100%. I think the thing that Gilad touched on was so important. You need a platform that allows you to take control. And I think, to me, that cannot be understated. There are some great platforms out there that have proven history for 25, 30 years, but you don't control any of it. And every time you need to control it, it's a $200,000, $300 customization fee. And organizations typically do not do it. They don't have the resources financially or the resources internally to manage those new changes, plus the validations, et cetera. So typically they don't do it. So then they're stuck. With a platform that's truly digital, where you can take process engineers and democratize them to learn a new software that's no code, low code, to really make monumental and incremental improvements to the business, is pretty special. Yep. I think, one of the things we talked about is it took us 6 months to do those 90 apps. Today we're over almost 300. We've digitalized over 700 business processes. And the team at Outset is phenomenal. And if they have a piece of paper, or something was a piece of paper, in hours, it can be digitalized and put on the floor. Yep. And I think, you'll have a scrap form that was used to be a paper system through our ERP. Okay, why don't we just digitalize that with Tulip and then connect it into our ERP? Yep. So all of those types of things happen so much faster when you have a platform that people can really interact with.
Right. So let's shift a little bit. When we asked industry, what are the primary barriers to validating a cloud solution? The top answer was regulatory, followed by culture. Now, in my experience, these are the excuses that industry uses. Because, the FDA is never going to accept a cloud solution. They're never, the EMA is never going to allow us to do that. Well, FDA rolled out their Office of Digital Transformation last year under Digitized. And the FDA is moving everything they have to the cloud, right? There's work that we've done with Cisco Vicente on CSA. The driver there is to implement modern technology, leverage some of the work that your vendors and partners are doing to remove these excuses. So with that in mind, Gilad, can you tell us a little bit about how you're helping industry remove some of those excuses to actually modernize more quickly and more efficiently? Because what we're finding is that those organizations who believe that the current framework fully supports digital transformation are digitally transforming. Those who don't believe it, even though it's the same regulatory framework, are not moving in that direction. So Gilad, let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, and this is a common topic, and we deal with this every day. And there's a number of things that are going on. I mean, first of all, this notion of IT/OT convergence and the advent of software as a service, that we're seeing today. So everything is moving to the cloud, but more than that, it's a new business. It's kind of a new business paradigm with you're paying as a service. Everything is as a service. It makes organizations question their existence to a certain extent. If I'm an IT organization, what am I supposed to do? The question of security comes around. It's essentially all, in a way, excuses. We have to understand that this is with this new paradigm also means that you have to question whether you're doing, what I've been doing so far in the organization, et cetera. I have a great story from a VP of IT in a very big pharmaceutical company that I know. And so, we talked about Tulip and other SaaS platform. And he says, why are you talking to me then? Go talk to the people who are going to pay your subscription. I really don't have a place in this game. And he's, to that extent, really progressive, but also pretty pragmatic. And I think that says a lot in what we need to do. But I think the bigger question here in the context is, what do we do? What do we do about validation? So there's you talked about the FDA moving to the cloud, Office of Digital Transformation. In fact, if we take a look at regulators, they have seen that they have created a monster with the way that we tackle validation, all the way back to the beginning of the 2000s, when they tried to bring around the whole notion of QBD, process analytical technology, and trying to move the industry away from sinking themselves into this validation process that's mired with paper. So now we are 2023, CSA is coming around. And we have to, finally with digital technology, finally take a look at how do we do validation. This diagram is actually from a concept paper that was published on the ISPE blog. It's called ISPE Speak as part of Pharma 4.0. There's a lot of these concept papers that are coming out, who's basically setting the standard for the industry and how we have to think about digital technology and who we use. So when we talk about validation, one of the biggest issues is that when we validate, the validation itself is a separate process that goes in parallel to the process itself. CSA does a lot of things, but one of the things that it advocates is to bring that, merging it together, focus on the process, focus on the risk-based approach, and basically validate to intended use. Yep. And when you do that, basically, if you put those two things together and you have digital evidence, meaning that these software is actually, they capture data for you, you can minimize the effort that it takes to validate these technologies order of magnitude. And I was with one of our customers at Tulip. We did a small exercise with them to try and bring them into the fold of this new method and this new way of thinking. And the VP of quality asked me, well, how long does it take to validate Tulip? Validate and a few apps in Tulip with one of your customers. And I said, really, 2 weeks. And he was not only stunned, but he tried to immediately push back. It's like, that's impossible, and you can't do that here. And I told him, you asked me what other customers can do, and I answered, right? That doesn't mean that you go from, where we are today to this you're not going to change overnight, but there's a process behind it. But I think what is important to understand is it is possible to do it that fast. So that should be the target, that should be the goal. I'm not saying that you're going to turn around and tomorrow take an organization with 30 sites and say, we're going to validate these things in 2 weeks. So that's an important message around what we're saying with this new process. Another very important piece is to understand that software as a service platforms really should come pre-qualified, and that's what we do at Tulip. Basically, everything we do at Tulip allows you to, if you audit us and believe that we have the right quality and we have all the evidence to show that, plus we have a lot of customers that have already done that, the platform comes qualified. You do not need to retest if it's, if the electronic signature adheres, to the requirements. That's already done for you. There's evidence to that extent. You can accept that. And really all that remains is to validate the content that you build on Tulip, the app themselves. And if you do it based on the new approaches, Validation 4.0, CSA, revalidating an app should really only take hours, essentially, right? And that's what happens at Outset and many of our customers as well.
Yep. And I think you bring up an excellent point, and this is something we need to change. So I know Al Taylor, who actually wrote that original guidance for FDA back in the late 90s. And if you look at the guidance, it actually talks about the fact that the terms validation, IQ, OQ, and PQ are not applicable to software. Even back then, when Al and John Murray wrote the guidance, they said those are not applicable terms. Today, we're removing the word validation from software, right? It's not CSV, it's assurance. And we're changing that overall mindset because many companies said they're using a risk-based approach. And when we challenge the executives or the QA folks who are saying, well, yes, we use a risk-based approach, but everything is high risk, and therefore we have to do everything the same way. The whole idea of validating for the intended use is understand the intended use first, and then look at what are the approaches that you're going to use. So with that in mind, Marc, can you talk a little bit about your journey around assurance and maybe share some of your experiences?
Sure. Gilad's spot on. With over, at this point, team, we're running with over 300 different apps. If they each took us 2 or 3 months to validate, probably in my career lifespan, I wouldn't see those 300 apps actually validated. So we're really also in that space. We validated in Tulip's case. We looked at the platform. We did an audit on its platform, as Gilad's showing in this slide. From there, we took a risk-based approach on every app we created. If we're building on a validated platform, We just need to make sure the different pushes and pulls of data, the way the data is displayed, is accurate and correct. And it's based on what's happening in that app. I think to your point, Dan, if you take a one ice cream flavor fits all approach, and everything is high risk and everything is, catastrophic risk, it makes it also very difficult to really discern what you should have your teams focus on. Yep. So I think that's a big thing. Another thing Gilad mentioned, with CSA now, it's easier than ever. When we started down this journey 3 years ago, CSA wasn't out yet. They were in discussions on it. But we started to take this more pragmatic approach based on really what made sense and where the industry was heading. And it was nice to kind of see that convergence with CSA. And I think when you look at that culture piece that you were discussing a little bit before, right, regulatory versus culture, what is more risky to a business? Is it more risky to a business to try to find a way to validate a system? Mm-hmm. Or is it more risky to a business to have paper, which we all know has issues with trying to get signatures, or GDP issues, or the amount of pages that end up going missing that you have to reprint and deal with? And now you have the inability truly to have quick access to your data for trending, which also increases your risk. If there's, God forbid, an issue in the field, the queryability of your data to actually contain what's going on takes weeks or months versus days or minutes. All of that seems a lot more risky to a business than finding an approach to validation.
Yep. And the pushback is always, yeah, all that's fine and dandy, but what are the auditors going to say? So can you maybe talk a little bit about your experiences working with the application in the regulated environment and how that has fared?
Sure. Yeah. So we have been audited by multiple regulatory organizations in the globe, internal, external, FDA facing, all of the above, if you will. All of them have come out and saying that the way that we validate it and the leveraging of that system is significantly beneficial ultimately to patient outcome. Yep. Because you then have the ability to see that data and truly make sure that you're in control. Yep. We really haven't had pushback from any auditing body on our approach to that validation or how we use the system. I will say at times you do have to, some of them have more experience in those platforms than others, and you just have to explain them how that platform runs. Because if you don't give them the background of how the system functions and what the platform means and what are we talking about, a tulip, or are we talking about a flower? What are all these things? It is important to kind of level set what it is and then explaining it, how it actually error-proofs your system, et cetera. So we've had a phenomenal feedback from the different agencies.
Yep. That's great. And really, that, to your point, that's the intent. The intent is, on paper, data integrity is very hard. And we've heard so much about data integrity recently in the last few years. When you're digital, data integrity, if you have a platform and you're able to bring everything together, it really streamlines the processes. So with that in mind, Marc, can you talk about what is some of the value and the results that Outset Medical has been able to achieve through your digital transformation initiative?
I would be happy to. So this is just kind of a layout of a manufacturing floor, right? So we really started at the beginning focusing on our work instructions and our batch history record system. So prior to it, we had, the system that you saw guys at the beginning, which is called Tableau. It's a complex piece of capital equipment. There are dozens of PCBAs. There's over 2,000 individual components, 70 different sensors. It's a behemoth to put together. It's like the Tesla of dialysis, if you will. And all of that required over 2,700 pages of work instructions. So the first thing we wanted to tackle was removing all of that paper. It, like Dan was saying, it makes it difficult for data integrity. It also is not of today. What I mean by that is people who are coming to work at our factories, the individuals coming out of university, the individuals that are our operators on the floor, they work with their phones. They walk around with their cell phones. They're always connected. So to put them into a system that's all paper-based is archaic. It doesn't drive that idea of ingenuity and creativity. So what we really started to look at was how do we change that paradigm? So we converted those 2,700 pages, 7,000 process, into a validated digital system, which also ended up being our EDHR. And we used to have a DHR that was, when printed, was 200 pages. Each unit ever built would be 200 pages. If we're building thousands of units, that's an issue. You need an archive, you need an iron mounted on site, if you will, just to store that data. So that's all been fully digitalized. With all of that data coming into our system on a minute by minute, second by second basis, we've been able to make significant insights into what can we fix quickly. So one of the first things we could fix through this new process is the finished good release time. If you have to go through 200 pages to understand where signatures are missing, if the data is in spec or not in spec, that takes time. We can now do it in under 20 minutes. Because that data is so readily available, and frankly, it checks itself. So nowadays, the amount of time actually spent is more higher value work than just looking to make sure the boxes were checked or an NA was striked out or something. The other thing that I think is really important from a cultural perspective as well, and I'm sure many of you, if you sit on a manufacturing floor, have this, are those quality police, or those quality inspector police, where they're roaming the floor, they're looking to see what's going on, and it kind of creates an animosity between the manufacturing team and the quality team because it's like someone looking over their back. Well, with a digital system where you can error-proof or poke-yoke your process, that goes away because ultimately the system will not let you continue if the data is not in range or in spec or et cetera. So that also not only reduces your staffing requirements, but also really improves your culture. And then lastly, through all of this data, because we're getting all of the data on our first pass yields and it's granular to the specific step, the specific component that we're using, we've been able to see significant improvement in first pass yields of over 30% in 2 years of running our facility, so double-digit growth yearly. And then the other space that we would talk about is the connectivity of systems. Tulip is phenomenal on its own, but when you can start to leverage it against an ERP or a QMS, there becomes the transformational space. And what we've been able to do is connect in Tulip into a multitude of different enterprise systems to have that system-to-system connectivity. So weekly, we move from an automatic perspective, 40,000 work order transactions in the cloud by itself. No longer do we have those work order transcribers who are sitting on the floor all day in the ERP system, virtually moving from one location to the next and then to the next one and keeps moving it. That all happens in the back end. Once again, freeing up our resources to do higher value work, generating more impact for the business.
Yeah. And that's a great point. I call it swivel chair integration, right? So you're going into this system, swiveling your chair, entering the data into that system, and that's so error prone. So 100%. Anytime you can eliminate that opportunity for error through technology, it just adds value.
Totally.
So Gilad, can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so I think, we talked about the showing value fast, et cetera. I think this is just a comparison, and I would like to go back and kind of the advent of all of this back in early 2020. And, the fact of the matter was that, Marc had to go live in a certain period of time that was less than 5 months. And the alternative was practically impossible. Like going with a traditional system was practically impossible. There was just no way they could have done it. They could have done it. And so, and this just talks to this value fast. It seems scary in the beginning because how can we just start with one little thing and then come to get to this complexity of a full site? And as I said, my experience was after we were done after a few months, it's like, really, is this really possible? Yes. So. It's also, if you look at it, it's also a low risk approach. I mean, you're not, Dan talked about putting the money up front and the investment up front. So, and I've said this in multiple webinars, I think, use lean mindset and just do it. Start small and build, I think is super important. Mm-hmm. There's other dimensions to this or aspects to this. We talked about quality and bringing changing the mindset of quality. By doing this small pieces at a time, it's actually easy to change quality's mindset because you're not saying, hey, why don't you wait 1 year And I'm going to show you this very complicated system that has transformed paper to electronic. Here, you're actually walking them through what it looks like. And we find this to be a very valuable process to, take an app, implement it within a few weeks, and then show the quality person, like, this is what the data is going to look like in this new system. So you're walking them through week by week how the data, you're getting them used to looking at data digitally. And it also translates to working with an auditor. It's not, you do not have to show them the complexity of an entire system, but say, you know what, let me show you an app, because an app is no code, and I can actually show you what it looks like. And let me show you the data that it took out. So it's not a very complicated data. It's not a lot of data. You just say, here I have a few steps to collect the data. This is what it looks like. And so that interpretability and the transparency of it all actually helps to change the mindset of the whole organization with that. So, I keep saying that every time, there's no need to wait. You can start now. You can bring quality around and, start showing value fast. There's really should be no excuses.
So wait a minute, you're saying you're using an agile type approach in order to make sure that things get done properly?
Yeah, and so, by the way, just so, agile and continuous improvement is essentially the same thing.
Yes.
It's essentially based on how we humans socially interact. What do we do if we can't find something or we can't figure it out? We try and see if it works, right? We don't wait there for 3 years for somebody to come and tell us that here is this, here is this. And with modern technology, where you can Google things, it's essentially the same thing we're doing. So, just listen to your inner voices and just get it done.
Yeah. And I think, the other point that's important to mention is when we talked to Al Taylor back in the day, if you look at those guidances that were written, he talked about the fact, I asked him, why did you put in that waterfall model? And he said, because it's easy to explain. But if you look at the guidance, following the waterfall model, it talks about what at the time was called concurrent engineering. Now we call it agile. And the guidance sings the praises of why it's better to do it concurrently in an agile model as compared to waterfall. But as an industry, we got stuck on the first picture that we saw, which was waterfall. That's what FDA must want. So those are really some of the big challenges that we face as an industry. The barrier is culture. When we asked what is the primary barrier to digital transformation in life sciences, 40% told us culture, followed by regulatory. And Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have the best strategy in the world. If your culture doesn't support it, then it's all for naught. So with that in mind, Marc, what cultural changes did you have to make in order to make digital transformation possible at Outset?
So I took this slide actually from from my 4IR officer who is amazing at Outset. And one of the things that we had to start to think about is how are we enabling our staff to control their destiny? How are we enabling us to do something different, right? So if we think about our product, we are disrupting the world of dialysis. Why can't we disrupt the way that manufacturing occurs also in dialysis or in the medtech space? So we use the same philosophy. We're a group of doers and thinkers, and we want to get things done. So we wanted to combine, which is what you see on the left, the 4IR components, if it's digitalization or big data or cybersecurity or IoT connectivity, with a change in our culture of what needs to shift. One thing that I'm really proud of is the culture at Outset is really strong, and it is about collaboration for a better, for a mission of supporting patients. And what you see here on that orange cycle is how do we empower our staff? And when we think about empowerment, we're really talking about training, giving them change management, understanding of, I'm not looking to take away jobs. I'm looking at transforming your job, making your job higher value, higher impact. And you're going to end up learning a new skill that will come through with that. We also recognize to both Dan and Gilad, we run Agile Scrum as our means of deploying new solutions to the floor. It's much faster, and frankly, you see the impact much quicker which generates that benefit for the business, but also shows to the leaders of the organization that this truly is the right thing. They're not waiting 6 months or a year or 18 months to see something. Another thing that we've done a lot from a cultural perspective is really democratizing the solution. We do not believe in the concept that there should be one process engineer or two process engineers doing all this work, that any engineer, and frankly, not even engineer, technicians and operators are going into Tulip through the system to put in changes. How empowering is it for you as an operator who has to build that thing every day to say, hey, you know what, I think I can take a better picture of that step and work with an engineer to upload that picture into the system. It doesn't get more empowering than that. And I think the last thing I would say around the way we changed culture was the setup of a 4IR office. We have an entire office, kind of like a project management office, that supports the democratization, that supports the training and governance. And that's really has made a significant improvement on the speed at which we can ramp. And then this is kind of an example of Tulip data being live and being able to work on digital dashboards and touch screens and actually being able to generate information. And this is done directly in the middle of our manufacturing facility. And this is purposely put there so that everyone can see the data and everyone can leverage that data to make better decisions.
Yep. Gilad, what are your thoughts? Can you share some of your experiences there?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this, I think for me it was a very important experience and kind of my aha moment of how powerful digital technology is. And again, great to see how Outset has embraced this technology. And we talked a bit about manufacturing, but it's actually gone everywhere in the facility, and there's good ideas to bring it to many different things. I think you can actually see it all the way on the right there. There's these two black things on the wall. Those are RFID readers. So it's labor tracking. And labor tracking as well. And I think, Marc, you also had some app to monitor what's the canteen or the consumption of food in the canteen or something like that.
We do. Everyone has RFID badges, and on the badge, it was a creative idea. We said, okay, how do we understand? Well, now we're even taking it further, Gilad. We said, how do we understand how many plates are going out? And now we want to understand what is the distribution of the type of food people are eating, so we make sure we have the right amount. So just to give an idea, it's not just for manufacturing; it's much deeper.
Yeah, and it goes all the way out to the warehouse and great things. And again, at the speed by which this happens, to see how people can raise people that are digitally native can embrace this technology and how powerful it is. So I love visiting the facility. I love talking about Outset and their capabilities. But again, it's the power that you give people to do things with this platform. And let and also the people in the quality assurance. At the end of the day, what you see is in the beginning of this hesitancy, excuse me, to what is this and can we be in control? But what Outset proves is that you can still be in full control, which is what the quality assurance people are all about, right? And still give that freedom for people to be creative and solve problems.
And I think, Marc, you brought up a very important point, and something that we talk about as well, is you have these highly trained engineers in manufacturing organizations or in life science organizations, and they are stuck pushing paper because they don't have the ability, or we don't give them the ability to actually add value to the business. And everybody can contribute. And to your point, it's not about how many people or how many heads can I cut. It's about how can I use the people that I already have to add more value.
100%. Exactly. And it's daunting to think that an engineer graduating at 22, to 25 is going into an organization that the way they live their life external to the organization is in a digital world with super connectivity. And they land in their first job or their second job, and it's archaic. That sounds so demotivating. So I giving them those tools, they will blow away any vision of what you truly thought was possible. To your point, that culture is going to eat strategy for love.
Yep, great. So at this point, what we'd like to do is turn it to the Q&A portion. So ask the audience to please type in your questions in the Q&A panel. While that is going on, Marc, what advice would you give life science companies who are embarking on their digital transformation journey? So the proverbial, if you know now then what you know now, would you do some things different? What values have you gotten? Share some of your experiences. I think those are extremely valuable.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is get going. That's the first thing. I think Gilad said it right. Get going. It was supposed to be yesterday, not today. So I would have done it. I would get going. But I think with that, it's not ending in the world of analysis paralysis. Not sitting in meetings debating, can we do this? Can we not do this? When Outset started off with Tulip, Gilad showed up to our headquarters in San Jose on his motorcycle with a Pelican briefcase, and we said, let's get to work. That's what we did. And then once Gilad left, I said, okay, Gilad, it has his role. And I said, okay, let me go see if this is possible. We didn't sit in meetings with, debating, can we do this or not? We said, is it possible? We downloaded the trial version and we said, okay, if with no training and no Tulip University or no nothing, if we could build an app, we knew it was possible.
Yep.
So that's what we did. And that's what I recommend to everyone. Rather than sitting in meetings debating, can we do it, can we not do it? Download the system, try it out, and see if it's going to work for your needs. And I would imagine most of you would be pleasantly surprised on what the outcome will be. It's not to say we didn't have hurdles and we didn't have things we had to fix, which was, better understanding how we should do our data management in the back end and stuff like that. We definitely learned a lot. But if you don't start, you'll never learn that.
Yep. Gilad, what advice would you give life science companies based on working with many industry organizations?
Yeah, I think I've said it now multiple times. Get going. I think, and I'd like to address, specifically the validation thing, which is becoming that there's a lot of interest in the, in this validation. But again, you have to lose the document mindset. Not everything has to be a document. Digital data is here to stay. So, you have to embrace it and try and start small and try it. Like you don't have to boil the ocean initially. Get going, see how it feels, how it looks. I think once you, the network effect, which is very, it's common in when we use digital tools, is also applies to culture change in an organization. So once you get somebody to say, this wasn't that bad, and then you take the next person and say, look what I did, and start from the bottom, this bottoms up, you'll get the change work going much faster, and it's exponential in nature.
And I think you brought up an excellent point. The agency is now using the term digital evidence as opposed to documented evidence. When we're talking about remote regulatory assessments, which were implemented during COVID, they're here to stay. And what they're asking industry is to provide that information electronically at their expense. So you can't mail it to them. They won't take it. It has to be in an electronic format. So we really need to change that mindset and that culture, which actually is a good lead into the next question that we had from the audience around, Marc, what were the biggest challenges to building that culture of innovation? And how did you overcome the challenges?
Sure. That's a great question. So when I think about the challenge to innovation, if I think about the root cause of that, at the core, many times it's organizations that struggle with allowing people to try, to make mistakes. What we, maybe in the software space we call hacking, right? Like trying some hacks to see if it will work. People are at times afraid to make a mistake about how it's going to project on the business. At Outset, we praise mistakes because in the sense that we've made mistakes, meaning we're learning and we're going to do things better. At the facility in Mexico, we've held evening events where it's called like screw up night, where we talk about the mistakes we've made, and that it's okay to make mistakes, that we try hard. We do hard work. So we're going to not make everything perfect, and we're going to learn from those mistakes. So building that culture of it's okay to try things. It's okay to try new technologies, new things. Some are going to pan out. Hopefully the most will, but there are going to be some that are not, right? That's part of development. I think that's the first part. when I think about how we continue to address that moving forward, is continuing our 4-hour office around change management, praising and highlighting and rewarding those great efforts and works that shows that innovation is key to our success. And ultimately, people come to work because they want to be empowered. They want to make an impact. So if they're given that opportunity to make change, and they feel comfortable that if they make that change, they're not going to be, reprimanded for making a mistake, then great things will happen. And that's what we've seen so far throughout the whole Outset organization.
And you bring up an excellent point. I love that screw up night. In many organizations, we let perfect be the enemy of good, right? So we're not going to roll it out until it's perfect, and then we never roll it out. So Gilad, what are your thoughts?
So again, I have to emphasize everything that's done so far. That's been said so far. This right. There's quite a number of quotes about trying or learning. So one of them says that calm oceans makes for very poor sailors. It's in our nature, and it's so kind of my main message to everybody with digital technologies. One of the things that makes digital technologies so inherently easier to use is because it actually aligns with how we behave as social creatures. And that's why you see, we talk about the social media and all that. The reason why it gains so much momentum is it perfectly aligns with how we humans, operate. And that's why it just is so explosive in nature. There's good and bad to it. We're not going to open the debate here. But if you apply it correctly in a manufacturing setting, right, you get that exponential, you get that explosive behavior of productivity. And that's what everything is about in digital transformations. We have to remember that digital transformation and all these cool tools that, from a manufacturing settings, and why it's a paradigm shift, because it ushers an order of magnitude productivity gain. When we went from steam to electricity, right, that was an order of magnitude productivity gain. Nobody's using steam anymore. Everybody's using electricity, right? In the future, everybody's going to be using digital tools. Nobody is going to use paper. If you're still there, you're trying to use steam. It's a losing proposition. Forget it. Just move forward, right? Unless you're a few years from retirement, maybe you can just say, I'm just going to retire now. But the point is, it's here to stay. It brings her on, and if you can't, you can't beat it, you have to join them, right?
So last question in 30 seconds, Marc, how difficult was it to train your frontline folks in the solution?
To leverage the solution, how easy was it?
Yeah, to use it.
It's super easy. So actually what we do now, every frontline operator, when they come in for an interview, they actually get set up with a Tulip training station. And we walk away from them and say, okay, build what you see on the screen. That's literally our training for our interview process, because it's that easy. We use touch phones we use touch smartphones all day. It's just a large touch screen. That's all it is. Yep. So it's I would say it's probably even easier than paper, to be honest with you at this point.
Absolutely. So that's all the time that we have for today. I want to take this opportunity to thank Marc and Gilad for sharing their insights on Outset Medical's digital transformation, as well as experiences overall. How do we achieve agility in seamless compliance through digital transformation? So thank you very much for sharing your insights today. We hope you enjoyed the session today and that you enjoy the rest of your day. Marc, Gilad, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.